Okay, iClick Training and Information Series, Episode 4, Choosing Your Location and Adjusting for Light. This is a pretty straightforward thing for mine. It takes a bit of experimentation though on your part. I encourage you to go out and shoot a lot of iClick photos and have a lot of fun with it. And just notice the subtle differences you get as you do different photos. Now here we are inside the wonderful gallery here at Noosa Harbourside, and it's wonderful what we've got here because we've got a really rich environment of things to look at. But even as you can see here with the video cameras that's pointed over the top of our iClick, is over here we've got this area here which is the external light, and regardless of what we do, that's probably going to blow out in terms of our iClick photo because that's a really bright light source over here as opposed to the darker area here on the wall and down low. And even these objects down in the foreground here, they're giraffes and the likes of that, are actually backlit to a certain extent, so our iClick photo is not going to turn out really good in our panoramic. But let's experiment with that and have a close look at, and we'll just pan around here with the actual video camera so you can see what's going on here. And we've got a lovely rich environment here. And look, that's really going to be wonderful for iClick. You look for photos where you've got a really good level of detail in every direction, and try and position your camera so that you're going to get a lot of detail. And you know, some situations are better than others. Standing on a beach that just looks out to the sea is a little bit boring, as opposed to a set of beach that's beside a cliff face with some sort of church or a cafe bar or some sort of social scene on the hillside nearby is going to make for a much richer panoramic photo than just a photo that's on a beach looking out to sea. So you're looking for rich parts of detail. I'm also out shooting Christmas lights the other day, and once again that had a very good and very interesting horizontal plane throughout the photo. I was able to position the camera to get some really good lighting, but I actually had to step into a front yard and amongst the Christmas lights to really get a decorative one that really worked in every direction, or to create a fun sphere of a photo. But anyway, so let's have a look at, so in choosing, selecting a good spot, and you also want to back away from walls as much as possible. You can see that I've actually put the tripod, set ourselves up in pretty much the middle of the room so that when we do shoot a iClick photo, we're going to get a photo in every direction. So this is also, we're going to look at one of the options here on, and probably do an experiment in this sort of circumstance because of the situation. And with our PhotoSynth app, we're going to go in and use that option I talked about earlier in the settings, and we're going to show ourselves and set ourselves exposure lock off. Now what that means is the iPhone camera is going to take different exposure photos as you pan around, and that makes things a little bit more complicated when it comes to stitching, because you might get some of the photos as they stitch together, the exposure being different is going to give you a slightly different effect in terms of, and a little bit of an element of surrealism, or show up a little bit of the stitching, which may or may not be to your pleasure. So the default, if we use exposure lock on, is always going to give you a better result in terms of the quality of photograph than exposure off. But in some circumstances where we're shooting with a diverse set of lighting, the exposure lock off is going to be more important. Now, well, what do we do here? Let's bring the camera in closer here, so hopefully we can see what's going on here for you a little bit. Pan down. And we're going to tap to start here. So exposure locks off. So we can see here that as we pan around, not a real great example of what I'm talking about, but as we go around here, we're seeing that, and I can see from here, is that the camera is actually adjusting for the light a little bit, and you can see that it's doing. So in these sorts of circumstances, you're going to find yourself probably shooting two photos and choosing between the two, one with the exposure lock off and one with the exposure lock on. So just to highlight what we're talking about here in this lesson, and we'll cap off at this, a couple of things to look at. When you're choosing your location, you want feature rich in every direction, or as many directions as possible. Second of all, back away from any walls, because that's just going to give you a whole lot of white or some sort of blank colour in one room on one side, which is going to be a bit boring for the viewer. 3, we're going to fiddle with our exposure lock, potentially using exposure lock on and off to shoot two different panoramas to see what the quality of the finished product that you get. And 4, I suppose the other thing is to also be aware of of detail less, or environments where there's not a lot of detail. Plain blue sky will come up and make things a little bit difficult to shoot, and also be a little bit boring. You're also going to have trouble up around architraves and up around the roof here and that sort of thing. This actually place is not too bad. It's got lines, it's a panels and exposed rafters, so it's pretty good for photographing, and previous experience with this particular location shows that it actually looks pretty good in all directions. A plain white ceiling is always going to be a bit harder, and it's actually the architraves. Sometimes you get a bit of a jagged edge in that. So once again, experimentation is the way to go for that. So anyway, that's the end of lesson 4. All the best, and get out and take some photographs and experiment for yourself.